Hey, how's it going, guys? Honest Sarcastic with the Hyperloops, and today I guess I'm going to talk about kind of like the not a meta breakdown of what I expect, but re-going over the meta musings before. I let Nick handle the thing, so I kind of forget some stuff and stuff I want to like talk about in general. So because the Rainbow Ayla Vehicles deck did very well last week in all three events, taking first, and second. I expect there to be a huge jump in popularity, and the question's going to end up being is do people who have like never seen the deck go and switch to it after just a week of testing? Maybe. Do they make adjustments to the deck? Most likely small ones. So keep that in mind, because there were pretty much two completely different lists. I don't know if Taxter ran the same exact list as the one that Agent of Zion ran, but I know Outrun's list was closer to the Hyperloops list, and he made his personal tech and meta changes. So I guess I would say this: if you're going to the event and you've had testing with a bunch of different decks, you would probably want something that puts up a relatively good fight or has high percentages versus Ayla Vehicles, Poe Hondo, and Mill. Now, to a lesser extent, we're still seeing Kylo Towson, but some of those players may end up making a shift after this last weekend, because only 1 out of 10 got in, whereas 3 out of 17 got in with Poe Hondo, and the Ayla vehicle decks were probably like 1 or 2 per event, and they crushed straight to the top. So I expect that to make a huge rise. Also, the fact that the deck is relatively cheap to make, it doesn't have a single legendary in there, so anyone can make it, from new players to anybody else. It was actually supposed to be our budget thing, but oh well, cat's out of the bag. So I would say make sure you have pretty good odds versus those 3. And now on the back burner, you don't necessarily want a completely awful match versus Kylo Towson. And the same applies to Mother 5s. The problem is, though, if you could beat all, 5 or 6 of those decks, then, like, what the hell are we talking about? You have the God tier. So we'll definitely see how this ends up going, provided everything goes correct. Bobo, Bobby Sapphire, and I will be attending the New Jersey Regionals, and possibly with our good friend Schnoo, Mike. There's 2 Mikes, man. Like, this is why nobody gets to have their first name. So we'll most likely make a showing there, provided there's no random issues. So anyone there, pleasure to meet you guys. Come say hi, and let's have a great time. So back to the meta stuff. There are some up-and-coming decks that I would expect you to see. So I expect Sabine Yoda may get some play, because for the most part it's I forgot the word. It's a negative playing experience when you die and couldn't do anything. So there are a lot of people that like to play Sabine because she can just activate, rip the weapon in, and then if she rolls hot fire, like, you just dragon breath your opponent away. So that, and then RI plus like never tell me the odds. So you'll probably see some of that deck make a rising. Could potentially end up taking one down. It's pretty unknown, but the bigger events are gonna kind of just be flooded with the top tier decks. So just try to make sure that you have those matchups down, you've done your testing, and that you feel relatively comfortable there, even if it's not necessarily a great match. Like, let's say it ends up being like a 40-60 or 30-70 in the opponent's favor. Like, just be very comfortable with the match, because your percentages vary based on if they're also comfortable. If it's a new deck that they just picked up, there, additional percentage point switches to your side, because there might be small things that they have to know to do or to avoid from your deck. Like, let's say you're playing like Tarkin 7th or Palpatine, Yoda Poe, Yoda Hondo. Like, these are all, like, I'd say minimum tier 2, as far as like tier 2, tier 1.5, tier 1. Like, they're not, oh my god, this is the worst deck ever. Like, this isn't essentially running around with like Moff Milando. Like, that deck can do random cool stuff. It's just so often it kind of just doesn't, and then falls apart and dies. So, like, anybody, you can win with any deck. You can run hot in a tournament. You can crush. So it's kind of one of those things. Just make sure you have an understanding of what you feel is best. Try to get extra testing for those matches in if you have the available time. And yeah, no, that's pretty much it. You just kind of want to know the ins and outs a bit better, so that you're not fumbling through it in the event and then making a mistake and immediately realizing the error. It's definitely a huge thing. So, like, expect tons of easy pickings from the hero deck, so be careful when you focus if they have a resource. You may see a bunch of garbage shoots between mill and vehicle decks, so don't get too greedy trying to do crazy stuff with like base and modifiers and then have both of your bases get blown out. Definitely a lot of interesting things that could occur. Oh, I also think like Yoda Zeb is very, very good, but I haven't really seen that. Trying to think what else there is. I just got a message. It won't go away from the screen. Yay, it went away. Trying to think what else is viably around. Like, there's other mill type decks, but you definitely want to have a base understanding of mill, so you don't just go into the match and just get ruined and lose. Because more often than not, I see a lot of people who just don't want to play test against mill because it just feels terrible to play against, and it's sometimes, it's just such a long game. But you got to get those reps in, because you're going to be playing against the villain, who's the villain. They use as the opponent. You're the hero, because you're supposed to save the day. But sometimes the hero dies. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So yeah, you definitely want to have lots of testing in versus mill, because if you don't understand that match, it can often be like an auto loss. I've seen a lot of people play against mill, and there's just some like small mistake things that they often just fail to realize. A lot of it involves like when to claim, when not to claim, what you expect them to do, how they get your hand at the end, because like the whole C3PO thing for discard, it'll be relevant, where people are like, oh, well, I'll just get all the cards in my hand and then stay alive via that. And if you really can't stop, a chance cube going to a 3 and taking 3 from your hand, then most of that round is over. So you better start that round with 5 cards, and you may not want to pitch a single one of them, because that's the only way you're going to get to another round. So keep some of the stuff in mind. Be wary of Sabine. It's going to exist. You often can't change your deck to have an answer to that. You just kind of do what you can. Expect there to be vandalizes, so if you're playing against vehicles or anything with like 4 character dice, they're and it's yellow, that's probably going to exist. So don't take some greedy shots that may not have needed to be there, and then find out that like life's too tough now. Trying to think what else is there. I guess Kylo FN still kind of exists. Probably really won't see that. A lot of the mainstream decks right now we're looking at Rainbow are pretty good even splits. So like something like 14, 14, 2 or stuff like that for color breakdowns. And the 2s are just gray. So like villains probably are always gonna have doubt. Anything with range probably has like hidden blast or holdout, something like that. So for the most part, that's that. And yeah, get the reps in. So I know of at least one regional going right now. Is New Jersey. There's probably about 3 more going live. So I'd say, keep in touch. Let me know how it goes. But kind of prepare yourself, both, rep wise, but also just mentally. Like, make sure, you're well rested. You've eaten okay. You just don't want to make a lapse of judgment to just something you could have taken care of. Go to the bathroom and you gotta use the bathroom. That one's a big one. You don't want to really play having to use the bathroom, and then you're just sitting there trying to end the game, and whoops, and you're dead. Trying to think what else. I don't know. I got no idea, guys. So things that I would say you want to know about some of the high decks. So against Mill, it may be in your best interest to spike off Partisan or Jetta. It's the yellow character if you can. The reason being is it shuts down several potential cards. Not necessarily easily, but better than you would expect. So if I'm not mistaken, Riken has 11 health, Yoda has 10, and the Partisan has 7. Actually, Partisan might have 8. We'll call it 8, because I feel like it's 8. So if you can spike Partisan off the table or force into him, then what ends up happening for you is that 1, you got rid of one of the 3 character dice. 2, you've made Garbage Chute much harder to use. They really do want Yoda's die for forever. So, sure, you could try to fight the Yoda, but that will likely overprotect him. Plus, the additional 2 health could be the difference between killing him in 1 round versus having to go to the next to get the kill, which could mean an additional mill from Riken and additional die usage, yada yada. But if you kill Partisan, you shut down easy pickings. If they're running Entangle, that shuts down. Trying to think what else is there. Garbage Chute becomes much harder to use, because if they Garbage Chute off Riken, they didn't get the mill. If they Garbage Chute off of Yoda, then you're pretty much losing Yoda's double focus or special. Partisan also has his own mill action, but sometimes you don't even see them use that, but they tend to throw Chance Q there. So if you take out the Partisan, you've kind of helped yourself out quite a bit. As far as their removal will progressively get worse, especially if someone went in with 2 easy pickings, 2 shoots, and an Entangle or 2. That'll be a pretty generous issue for them. Poe Hondo, if you can go kill Poe relatively fast, then depending on what you have left, assuming you didn't just lose everything, you could kind of just feed Hondo money to shut down his own character dice, and then you really only have to deal with the upgrades. So from that regard, it tends to be easier to close out the game killing Hondo, because let's say you attack Hondo, 1, you have to fight through second chances, and then the other thing is that if let's say you run into the second chance, you're gonna struggle a bit more, because now you have to do the extra 5. So feeding into them, Poe has better dice when he's being fed resources. So sure, they won't be able to take more of your resources down the line, but his actual dice for focus, the special chaining, and the overall just damage sides will be better than Hondo's, which is double disrupt, discard, focus, and then the double special. So for the most part, he's just gonna eat up your resources, and you'll kind of just be okay with that and move on with your life. And you just have to deal with the other dice, and because his damage will be low down, you'll feel that will be much smoother. So if you can go snipe Poe off the table prior to really losing one of your guys, you should be in a pretty good position. Doesn't mean you auto win, but good position. For Ayla vehicles, it's a little weird. So it's kind of based on what you're playing. Rose helps feed the deck out. Ayla actually does... Ayla kind of just helps flick damage on in the early stages. And then has like the whole special thing going on to help fix some stuff and disrupt you a bit. So like a lot of people do focus Ayla. Ayla is not always the correct move. Depending on like the round that we're, you know, able to go kill her, it's kind of an awkward spot. So well, let's talk about it real quick. So now let's say you try to focus down Ayla. Assuming that they have access to like cautions and stuff, they can usually easily give up a Rose die. If not, then just give up Ezra's die to caution the Ayla. And it's the one extra health there. So they could be, once again, back to the difference between like killing it in a round earlier versus the next round, and them getting to use the dice. Rose helps feed the well, one, removing damage off of Modified Hawk. If they never get to remove damage off Modified Hawk and Rose died, the Modified Hawk becomes like a severe liability. It really becomes kind of like I think it's like the card was Hate. It was the one where like pretty much you activate and ping myself and ping your opponent. Modified Hawk will start doing stuff like that because you're looking at the 2-3-3-4 side, and they're taking 2 every time they activate it. So like if they take 2 and you eat the die, you just kind of got the sickest like lightsaber throw ever because you got to deal them 2 and eat the die. So like Rose tends to be the more preferred target. You do need to keep in mind that Ezra is what helps for the easy pickings and garbage shoots. So if you're playing an aggro deck and you can snipe them in one round, you might just take the Ezra off the table. In theory, though, if you were that close to killing Ezra, you may have also been that close to being able to kill Rose. So doing that may make sense, or may make better sense, because then they can't feed out additional large vehicles, and then any Modified Hawks that come down are not going to be able to take those damage off. So if you have to make them choose, so like if you kill Rose and they're playing like Zion's expensive removal deck, you end up being in a better position because they really don't get to easily choose whether to play upgrades or removal. So like, sure, C-3PO's 1, R2-D2's 1, and then you're going to have Modified Hawks and T-47 airspeeders, which cost 2. But then the 3-drop suite is like Y-Wings, Resistance Bombers, whether they have like ETAs. But their removal suite is like Flank, Pin Down, Garbage Shoot, Easy Pickings. Those all cost 1. So if they can't generate additional resources, which Rose pretty much guarantees every round, it makes it harder for them to further their plan while slowing your plan down. So in that situation, targeting Rose makes the most sense. But let's say your opponent does something crazy like, you know, round 1 tech team rally aid, like gets both of them down. They're going to probably be able to afford stuff very easily. So you're not going to be in a great position, but you have to kind of just think about, all right, well, how are you going to win this game? Taking the resources still might make sense because rally aid's more of a late round activation, unless their hand is all weapons. I mean, all vehicles. So, but tech team will let them sneak in the smaller stuff at a more premium cost. But they did have to pay for the ones up front. So killing Rose even then still might make sense, because even though they'll have generated a couple positives, assuming you're damaged, like assuming you didn't just like lose guys all of a sudden somehow, it makes the most relevant sense. But a lot of time you really have to decide whether you want to just shut down some of their removal or whether you want to slow down their game plan. So like if you can hit hard and fast, killing guys may make sense to shut down garbage shoots, or not to shut down garbage shoots, but these make them very painful, but it'll shut down easy pickings and, like I said, entangle. And we haven't seen a ton of entangle because it costs 2, but if any of the decks decide that they just want to have slightly better removal and no one's targeting Ezra, they may go that path. So especially if, let's say, you know, you've been scouting the big event and you see that these people are running entangles and easy pickings, then your choice may be slightly easier to kill Ezra. Just remember that if they're running like Vandalizes, because like it's really hard to narrow down their exact list. If they're running Vandalizes, killing Ezra doesn't really slow that down nearly as much. Whereas if you kill Rose, it becomes much harder for them to remove their die. Like if they're killing like a Force illusion, sure they can still like just pop Ezra's die because his die is not always amazing. But if they wanted to hit like your Ancient, your Maul Saber, stuff like that, they'd have to give up 3 dice, and it's much harder for them. If you're running Bala, you probably actually just kill the Ezra and get the untap to shut down like flanks and easy pickings, and then go smoke Rose off the table after. If you're concerned about the direct damage, you could go for Ayla. But the big thing you have to take into consideration is that if we compare Rose's die to Ayla's die, because they both have the 2 indirect, we're really only looking at Ayla has, you know, 1 base, 2 base, or 1 direct, 2 direct, resource, and then the special to mess with dice. And Rose is looking at disrupt, discard, which probably won't get resolved, but if there are times where they feel that it's pertinent, they will. And then we're looking at the double resource building side that removes damage. So it becomes very easy to see that Ayla furthers the damage plan, whereas Rose furthers the resource generation. They're really almost equivalent. It's just that because of like M-Hawks and the overall cost of the deck, Rose tends to be a slightly more important target, and the 1 health differential does make it easier to kill, as well as people are more inclined to caution a Rose die on early activations, especially if they're trying to like kind of hold garbage chute back or access to it back with Ezra, or like threaten it at least. So that one becomes very relevant. So we think we just talked about vehicles. We talked a bit about Mill. We talked about some Poe Hondo. Kylo Tausen's a really weird one to try to kind of pick out. So for that one, it really depends on like your damage cap, as well as like how much disruption you have. So assuming they're on the 28 odds plan, if you can kill or stop Chance Cube or Holocron, whichever one they have, it puts a huge dent in their resource, because they're pretty much, they're working on borrowed time. Like they have to do like it binds to afford upgrades more reasonably. They need Chance Cube if they're trying to afford like Rise Agains and stuff. Holocron for cheating their packages. So if you nab the Holocron or Chance Cube, like they get set back there. They still have access to a pretty good package of damage from their character dice, but without additional upgrades, sometimes you can just tank that much more easily. You have to be careful for Witch Magic and Rise Agains changing your damage expectations. So like keep that in mind, especially if they've been capable of generating the additional resources or just not casting anything. But for the most part, assuming that you clear out their resources, you're in a good position to kind of do whatever you want. Like eventually there may be versions running doubts and giving up the focus on Tausen a bit more, but realistically you're probably looking at 2 to 4 0 drops from them, and if they have no money, they can't really do much of anything. So try to get in where you can. If you're very weak against Kylo, you pretty much get forced to target him, because you can't kill Tausen and have Kylo just smash you to pieces. But yeah, so they can come out pretty hard and fast at times, so keep that in mind. For Mother 5s, the expectation is like we still don't really know if the Tausen Bala or Sienna Bala is the better version. The Tausen Bala version has better times with base and is harder to have their stuff removed overall, because they can tend to just roll their dice out and kind of resolve it as they choose to, because the number of modified sides they have is severely lacking. Whereas the Bala Sienna Night Sister version can have a more, not guaranteed, but they have a smoother set of rounds due to Night Sister and their ability to mess with both themselves and their opponents. But because of all their modified sides, if you can pretty much kill off their base, they have a very tough time. So it's a deck that you'll still always expect to see around. If Ayla Vehicles becomes very, very popular, because of like cost restraints and whatnot, it like Ibala can make a huge comeback, because he can pretty much just rip that deck to shreds, because they can't focus down very well. So even though he only has 8 health, if they get their field for their resource extra, then he has 10. If you end up with Bala's field, then sure, he only has 8, but like I said, you can't do direct damage very easily. It can happen where you round 1 kill a Bala that has 8 health, but it's just not super likely. So if Ayla Vehicles makes a huge jump, we can see that come back up, and that should have a pretty good matchup versus Mill as well, because 3 characters and the untaps, and if the Knight's Subversion in general is a huge nuisance to Mill at times, because you just don't get to, you know, maintain your Yoda specials. You have to luck back into it at the 33% clip. I mean, he can poke a lot of his damage and not care. So lots of free rerolls. 7th OTK hasn't seen much, if any, play since that Dallas regional. So definitely very interesting to see that it went by the wayside. Not sure if people just decided not to play it, switch to new hotness or what. But occasionally you might see this at the top tables. Trying to think. Zodi Yeb has lots of, I think I said that weird. Yoda Zeb has some very nice things. Figuring out the weapon package has been very hard for most people. So we really don't know where it is from that standpoint. But you should definitely expect to see some sort of yellow-blue villain hero deck, whether it be like Sabine Yoda or Zeb Yoda. Sabine is a big pain in the ass, so just good luck with that one. Hope your matchup wasn't too bad. What else is there? I'm trying to think if there's, like, other than that, there's just like a bunch of decks that you'll see randomly. So like Zach Bunn pretty much always plays Hanrei. So outside of seeing him or, you know, Enigma, for the most part, if you sit down to Hanrei and you're not anywhere in the Team Covenant area, should be not a hugely amazing bad time, because Hanrei rerolls into Oblivion. They may just crush you with some God roll, but somewhere in the tournament they're going to reroll into Oblivion and hate themselves. I'd like to see FN back, but most people are kind of just grabbing whatever decks they feel are good and going with it. There are some people that are, you know, secretly creating all these decks. I guess that didn't sound right. There are people that put a lot of effort and time into specific decks that they like. So you could potentially see new up-and-coming decks on the rise, or old decks make a comeback. We really haven't seen Big Daddy Vader in a while. But he's very good in general. So like maybe see something with like Towson, or I've seen people try to play him with Newt. That was interesting, to say the least. They do it with like the whole leadership thing. And like the mill turns into a like secondary win condition, because between his discard and that mill, he's a big pain in the butt. And then the red lets you get like best defenses and whatnot, and then you still never really want to kill Newt. And then he like leaderships or price of failures, and you're just like, God damn it. So I don't know if we'll see him back, but who knows. But I guess that's pretty much all I have to say. I've talked for probably 15 more minutes than I expected. Kind of expected this one to be kind of short, and then I just started talking about deck lists and whatnot, and ways to kind of beat them, who the main targets are. But just bear in mind that even though I'm talking about like the main target stuff, this isn't some set in stone testament on how to beat the deck. It's just kind of talking about who's the most important. There are going to be tons of times where not targeting that person makes the most sense. Like, oh, maybe the vehicle deck did a whole, like, blank caution thing, like you weren't even attacking to protect Rose, because they expected you to attack Rose. So then you're like, all right, well, you know, you can keep her there. I will just, you know, kill Ezra or whatever. Because, like, there's situations like that where if your opponent's running, like, Republic Cruiser, or more things for shields, if they just maintain all the shields, you don't really need to care about that person. So maybe Riken puts 3 shields on Yoda. Do you want to still keep fighting Yoda with 3 shields? Or decide at that point, you know what, let me just kill Partisan, or let me just go kill Riken. They're always, like, monitor the amount of damage you have to output, and your expectation of what they'll get available for shields and all that whatnot. But yeah, that's the end of this video. Let me know if anything I said helped, as far as you know, your deck building creation, events you're going into. You know, let me know your I almost said horror stories. I forget what it's called when you actually do well. Success stories, yes. Let me know your success stories. If any of you guys do very well at a regional, you know, even making just top cut, you want to talk about your deck, feel free to reach out, and we don't mind, you know, posting up an article. We get guest posts all the time. As much as we seem super douchey on Reddit, because we kind of just don't really care at times, and we treat people, for the most part, how they treat us. Yeah, just reach out to us. If you did, you know, 6-1, you'd made top cut, and, you know, you got top 4, top 8 with something new, like, hit us up. Like, if you want to write an article, we'll post it up. Not gonna sit there and, you know, hate. Like, you did well, you did good. And we're not gonna, like, throw shade at you if it was, you know, a 30-player regional or a 20-player regional. Now, if it was a 4-player regional, might have to throw some shade, my man. That's the best top 4 ever. You played with that 1 red Stormtrooper and 30 red cards that weren't upgrades, because you're just like, I can do it. I top 4'd with it. Booyah! Like, that'd be pretty epic. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I think I'd rather win. But, like, if you troll that enough, like, that's pretty amazing. Like, think about it. Would people scoop to you because you played with 1 Stormtrooper? Probably not. But, if you think about it, it's funny. Not really. I don't know. Well, Hyperloop out. Deuces.